The cargo bay of the Zephyrian slave ship reeked of fear and desperation. Among the dozens of captured beings from across the galaxy, 17-year-old Maya Chun sat in silence, her dark eyes observing everything while revealing nothing. The other prisoners wailed, screamed, or begged. Maya simply watched. She had been working the asteroid mines of Kepler 442b when the raiders came. While her fellow miners panicked and ran, Maya had calmly gathered her tools and waited. Running was pointless when dealing with Zephyrian hunters. Their ships were faster, their weapons deadlier, and their tracking systems could follow heat signatures. Across 3 star systems, the blue-skinned Zephyrian guard strutted through the cargo hold, his plasma whip crackling with energy. He enjoyed the fear his presence created. Most species in the galaxy had learned to tremble at the sight of Zephyrian military armor. Their empire had conquered 17 solar systems in the past century, enslaving billions. "Fresh meat for the Empress," the guard sneered, his translator unit rendering his words in perfect standard galactic. "You will all serve the glory of the Zephyrian Empire, whether in the mines, the factories, or the arena." A large, furry being from the Centauri system began sobbing. The guard's whip lashed out, leaving a burning mark across the creature's back. Silence. Slaves do not weep in the presence of their betters. Maya's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. She had seen enough cruelty in her short life. Growing up on the frontier colonies taught you that the universe was harsh, but it also taught you something else. Bullies were the same everywhere. No matter what planet they came from, the transport ship shuddered as it entered hyperspace. Maya knew they were headed for Zephyr Prime, the capital world of the Empire. She had heard stories about the planet from other miners. It was a world of impossible spires and floating cities, powered by the labor of 1 billion enslaved beings from across the galaxy. What the other prisoners didn't know, what the guards couldn't possibly understand, was that Maya Chun wasn't just another human colonist. Her grandmother had been Dr. Elena Shun, one of the lead researchers on Project Harmony before the government shut it down. Before Maya was even born, her grandmother had made modifications to her genetic code. Enhancements that wouldn't manifest until Maya reached adulthood. The modifications were subtle, designed to appear as natural human abilities taken to their logical extreme. Enhanced pattern recognition, perfect pitch, and something Dr. Chun had called harmonic resonance, the ability to find and manipulate the natural frequencies that existed in all matter. Maya felt the ship's engines humming beneath her feet. Every piece of technology had its own frequency, its own rhythm. She closed her eyes and listened, really listened, to the symphony of mechanical sounds around her. The plasma conduits sang in B-flat. The artificial gravity generators rumbled in a deep C minor. The environmental systems whispered in complex harmonies that most beings would never hear, but Maya heard it all. The Zephyrian guard was making his rounds again, stopping in front of a group of Andromedan refugees. These were peaceful beings, philosophers and artists whose entire world had been strip-mined for its rare earth elements. The guard raised his whip, clearly intending to make an example of the eldest among them. "Please," the old Andromedan whispered, his mental voice transmitted through the ship's translation matrix. "We have done nothing wrong." The guard laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the metal walls. "Wrong? You existed in territory the Empress desired? That is crime enough." Maya opened her eyes. Something deep in her chest was building, a warmth that spread through her bones. Her grandmother's modifications were finally awakening. Triggered by the injustice she witnessed and the harmonic frequencies surrounding her, without thinking, without planning, Maya spoke. "Stop." It wasn't loud. It wasn't forceful. But something in her voice made the entire cargo bay fall silent. The guard's whip froze mid-swing. Every being in the hold turned to look at the small human girl who had dared to speak. The guard's face twisted with rage. "Did that pathetic human just give me an order?" He spun around, his weapon charging with deadly energy. "I'll show you what happens to slaves who forget their place." Maya stood slowly, her bare feet finding purchase on the cold metal floor. She could feel it now, the connection her grandmother had tried to explain in her old research notes. Every frequency around her was becoming clearer, more distinct. The ship's systems hummed with mechanical precision, but there was something else, something alive in the sound. The guard raised his weapon, finger tightening on the trigger. Maya tilted her head slightly, listening to the plasma whip's charging cycle. It operated on a very specific frequency, a harmonic that resonated with the ship's power grid. She opened her mouth and sang a single, pure note. The plasma whip died in the guard's hands. The lights in the cargo bay flickered. Emergency alarms began to sound as the ship's system struggled to compensate for the sudden harmonic disruption. Maya's voice had found the frequency of the ship's power distribution network and turned it against itself. The guard stared at his weapon in shock. Then at Maya. For the first time since their capture, fear flickered across his blue features. In 3 centuries of Zephyrian expansion, they had never encountered anything like this. Maya met his gaze steadily, her voice still humming that perfect, impossible note. Around her, the other prisoners watched in amazement as their captor's technology failed for the first time in anyone's memory. The girl from the asteroid. Mine's was just getting started. The Zephyrian transport ship limped into orbit around the capital world 3 days later. Emergency repairs had kept the vessel functional, but barely. The chief engineer couldn't explain what had caused the cascade failure in the power grid. His instruments showed impossible readings. Harmonic disruptions that shouldn't have been able to occur in a properly shielded system. Maya sat in the same corner, where she'd spent the entire journey. But now the other prisoners gave her a wide berth. Word had spread quickly through the cargo hold about what she had done. Some whispered that she was a witch from the old Earth legends. Others believed she was a secret weapon created by the human resistance. Maya knew the truth was both simpler and more complex. Her grandmother's research had been based on a simple principle. Everything in the universe vibrated at specific frequencies. And those frequencies could be manipulated if you knew how to listen, Dr. Chen had called it. The language of reality itself. The guard who had threatened the Andromedan refugees now avoided Maya's section of the hold entirely. His plasma whip remained functional, but he'd seen what happened when the small human girl decided to sing. 3 separate attempts to execute prisoners had ended with his weapon mysteriously malfunctioning. The other guards had started calling it the human curse. As the ship descended through Zephyr Prime's atmosphere, Maya pressed her face to the small porthole near her corner. The planet was everything the stories had promised and more. Massive crystalline spires stretched into the clouds, their surfaces reflecting the light of twin suns. Floating platforms connected the towers, supporting entire cities that drifted through the air like mechanical clouds. But Maya's enhanced senses picked up something the others couldn't perceive. The entire planet was singing. Every structure, every vehicle, every piece of technology resonated with carefully tuned frequencies. The Zephyrians had built their civilization on harmonic principles. Using sound and vibration to power their greatest achievements, they had no idea. They'd just brought their perfect counter aboard a slave transport. The landing was rougher than usual. Maya could hear the pilot struggling with the ship's damaged systems, trying to compensate for the harmonic distortions that still echoed through the vessel's structure. When they finally touched down, the cargo bay doors opened to reveal a processing facility that stretched as far as the eye could see, thousands of beings from across the galaxy moved in organized lines, sorted by species and capability. Massive holographic displays showed current market prices for different types of slaves. Warriors from the Outer Rim brought premium prices for the gladiator pits. Skilled technicians were valued for the manufacturing centers. Artists and intellectuals were purchased by wealthy Zephyrians as exotic pets. Maya watched as the prisoners from her transport were categorized and assigned to different holding areas. The Centaurian who had been whipped was sent to heavy labor. The Andromedans were tagged for domestic service. When the guards reached Maya, they hesitated. "What do we do with this one?" asked the guard who tried to kill her. His hands shook slightly as he looked at her. "She's dangerous." His supervisor, a tall Zephyrian female with elaborate tattoos covering her arms, studied Maya with interest. "Dangerous?" She's barely more than a child. What could one small human possibly do? Before the guard could explain, Maya decided to answer the question herself. She had been listening to the facility's harmonic signature since the doors opened. The entire complex operated on an incredibly sophisticated frequency network, with each section tuned to different resonant patterns. It was like a massive musical instrument, and Maya was beginning to understand how to play it. She hummed softly, barely audible above the noise of the processing center. The supervisor's datapad flickered. The guard's restraint cuffs loosened slightly. Around them, other pieces of equipment began to malfunction in small, seemingly random ways. The supervisor frowned, tapping her malfunctioning pad. Technical difficulties. Tag her for general labor and move on. We don't have time for delays. But as Maya was led toward the holding area with the other human prisoners, she made mental notes about everything she'd observed. The facility's security systems, the transport schedules, the guard rotations, the harmonic frequencies that controlled it all. Her grandmother had designed her modifications well. Pattern recognition was just as important as sonic manipulation. The human holding area was overcrowded and depressing. Men, women, and children from dozens of human colonies sat or lay on hard benches, waiting for their assignments. Maya found a quiet corner and closed her eyes. Extending her enhanced hearing throughout the facility, she could hear everything. Guard communications carried through the ventilation systems. Transport ships arriving and departing followed predictable acoustic patterns. The facility's central computer core hummed with a complex harmony that controlled everything from life support to security protocols, and deep beneath the surface, Maya heard something else. A low, powerful frequency that seemed to come from the planet's core itself. It was old, primal, and somehow familiar. As if the planet itself was trying to tell her something. You're the one who broke their ship. Maya opened her eyes to find a middle-aged human man sitting nearby. His clothes marked him as someone from one of the inner colonies, probably a merchant or administrator before his capture. I don't know what you mean, Maya replied carefully. The man smiled grimly. The guards are terrified of you. They think you're some kind of weapon. Are you? Maya considered the question. Was she a weapon? Her grandmother had certainly designed her abilities with conflict in mind. Project Harmony had been shut down because the government feared what Dr. Chun was creating. But Maya had only ever used her gifts to help people, to stop cruelty when she encountered it. I'm just someone who listens, she said finally. The man nodded as if that answer made perfect sense. My name is Dr. Marcus Webb. I was the head of xenobiology at New Geneva University before the raiders came. I've been studying the other species here, trying to understand how this empire functions. He gestured toward the facility beyond their holding area. Did you know that every enslaved species has tried to resist at some point? The Centaurians had warrior traditions that took 50 years to break. The Andromedans organized passive resistance movements that lasted decades. Even the peaceful Mallory attempted sabotage operations. Maya listened politely, but her attention was divided. She was still analyzing the harmonic patterns around them, building a three-dimensional map of the facility's acoustic properties in her mind. But humans, Dr. Webb continued, humans have only been enslaved for 15 years. We're still considered a minor species, barely worth the effort to properly guard. They think we're weak because we haven't mounted any significant resistance. Maybe we've been waiting for the right moment, Maya said quietly. Dr. Webb's eyes sharpened. Or the right person. Before Maya could respond, alarms began to sound throughout the facility. Red lights flashed as automated announcements echoed through the chambers. Maya didn't need the translation to understand what was happening. Her enhanced hearing had picked up the approaching ship several minutes ago. Someone very important was coming to the processing facility. Someone whose arrival required every guard to be at attention and every system to be operating at peak efficiency. Maya smiled slightly. Perfect timing, really. She'd just finished mapping the facility's harmonic signature. Now she was ready to conduct her first symphony. The ship that descended from the orbital platforms was unlike anything Maya had ever seen. While most Zephyrian vessels followed utilitarian designs, This craft was a work of art, its hull curved in impossible spirals, covered with crystals that sang as atmospheric winds passed over them. The sound was hauntingly beautiful, a melody that spoke of power and ancient authority, through the holding area's reinforced windows. Maya watched as elite guards formed precise formations around the landing pad. Their armor was different from the standard Zephyrian military gear, darker and more elaborate. Each soldier moved with deadly precision, their weapons humming with barely contained energy. "Imperial Guard," Dr. Webb whispered beside her. "I've heard about them but never seen them in person. They only serve the royal family directly." The ship's boarding ramp lowered with a soft harmonic chime. Maya's enhanced hearing picked up the complex frequency patterns woven into every aspect of the vessel. This wasn't just transportation. It was a mobile throne room, designed to project authority through sound and vibration. The figure who emerged made Maya's breath catch in her throat. Even across the distance of the landing pad, she could see the elegant power in every movement. The Empress of the Zephyrian Empire was tall even by her species' standards. Her blue skin marked with intricate silver tattoos that seemed to shift and flow as she walked. Her hair was white as starlight, woven with crystals that chimed softly with each step. But it was her companion that made every prisoner in the holding area press against the windows in shock and terror. Walking beside the Empress was a creature from the darkest legends of a dozen worlds. A shadowhound, the beast stood nearly 7 feet tall at the shoulder, its body covered in midnight black fur that seemed to absorb light itself. Its eyes burned with an inner fire, and when it opened its mouth to taste the air, rows of crystalline teeth caught the light like diamonds. Shadowhounds were thought to be extinct, the last survivors of an ancient species that had once hunted through the void between stars. "Impossible," Dr. Webb breathed. "The historical records say they died out thousands of years ago. How does she have one?" Maya couldn't answer because she was too busy listening. The shadowhound moved with absolute silence, but Maya's enhanced senses detected something extraordinary. The creature wasn't just walking beside the Empress. It was harmonizing with her. Every step, every breath, every heartbeat was perfectly synchronized. They were bonded at a frequency level deeper than most beings could comprehend. The Empress moved through the processing facility like a force of nature. Guards snapped to attention as she passed, their weapons powered down in a display of respect. Facility administrators scrambled to present status reports and inventory manifests. Everything had to be perfect for her inspection. Maya watched as the royal procession moved through different sections of the complex. The Empress examined groups of enslaved beings with clinical detachment, nodding approval at some and dismissing others with subtle gestures. The shadowhound remained at her side, occasionally lifting its massive head to scent the air. "She's looking for something specific," Maya realized. "This isn't a routine inspection." Dr. Webb nodded grimly. "There have been rumors. Whispers about increased resistance activity in the outer systems. Some say the Empress is personally hunting for the leaders of a growing rebellion." The procession was getting closer to the human holding area. Maya could feel the shadowhound's presence like a weight against her consciousness. The creature's senses were incredibly acute, far beyond those of any natural predator. If it was hunting for something, it would find it. The facility supervisor rushed ahead of the royal group, his voice carrying clearly through the thin walls. "Your Imperial Majesty, we have several new acquisitions that might interest you. Fresh captures from the Outer Rim, including a group from the human colonies." The Empress's voice was like crystal chimes in a gentle wind, beautiful and utterly cold. "Humans, yes, I have been curious about their recent activities." "Show me." Maya felt her heart rate spike, but her grandmother's training kicked in automatically. She controlled her breathing, found her center, and listened to the harmonic patterns around her. Fear was just another frequency, and she could choose whether to resonate with it or not. The doors to the human holding area opened with a pneumatic hiss. Imperial guards entered first, their weapons scanning for any potential threats. The Empress followed, her silver tattoos seeming to glow in the harsh facility lighting. The shadowhound padded silently beside her. its burning eyes surveying every human prisoner. Most of the humans pressed themselves against the far walls, instinctively trying to put distance between themselves and the predators who had entered their space. Dr. Webb remained seated, but Maya could hear his accelerated heartbeat. Only Maya herself remained completely calm, still sitting in her corner, still listening to the complex symphony of sounds that surrounded them. The Empress moved among the prisoners, her gaze assessing each one with the cold calculation of someone who saw beings as resources rather than people. She paused occasionally to examine particularly strong or skilled individuals, making mental notes for later processing. Then the Shadowhound stopped. Its massive head turned toward Maya's corner, nostrils flaring as it caught a scent that shouldn't exist. The creature took a step closer, then another, its body language shifting from casual alertness to focused attention. The Empress noticed immediately. "What is it, Keth? What do you smell?" The Shadowhound's name was apparently Keth, and it was communicating with its bonded partner through channels Maya could barely perceive. The conversation was happening at frequencies beyond normal hearing, a complex exchange of harmonic patterns that spoke of confusion and growing interest. Maya met the creature's burning gaze directly. She'd learned long ago that showing fear to predators only made them more aggressive. Instead, she opened her enhanced senses fully, letting her perception expand to encompass the harmonic signatures of everything in the room. What she discovered made her gasp in shock. The Shadowhound wasn't just bonded to the Empress through training or dominance. They were connected at a fundamental level, their life frequencies so perfectly synchronized that they were essentially two parts of the same being. It was the most beautiful and terrifying thing Mia had ever encountered. But there was something else, something that made the Shadowhound tilt its massive head in obvious confusion. Maya's own harmonic signature was unlike anything the creature had ever encountered. Where most beings had simple, single-frequency life patterns, Maya's modifications created a complex symphony that seemed to resonate with multiple aspects of reality simultaneously. The Empress followed her companion's gaze, her silver eyes fixing on Maya with sudden intensity. "You stand up." Maya rose slowly, keeping her movements non-threatening. She was acutely aware that she was probably about to die, but she found herself curious rather than afraid. This was the most powerful being in the known galaxy, and her companion was a creature of legend. Whatever happened next would certainly be interesting. "State your name and origin," the Empress commanded, her voice carrying harmonic undertones that would have compelled obedience from most species. Maya felt the compulsion wash over her, and simply let it pass through without resistance. "Maya Chun, Kepler 442b mining colony?" The lack of immediate compliance made the Empress's eyes narrow slightly. Very few beings could resist her voice without obvious effort. But the human girl showed no signs of struggle, no indication that she was fighting against the harmonic command. She had simply ignored it. The Shadowhound took another step closer, its massive form now looming directly over Maya, this close. She could see that its fur wasn't truly black, but rather a deep purple that absorbed most wavelengths of light. Its breath smelled of ozone and starlight, alien but not unpleasant. Then the impossible happened. The Shadowhound lowered its great head and made a sound Maya had never heard before. It wasn't a growl or a roar. It was almost musical, a low harmonic tone that seemed to resonate in her bones. The creature was trying to harmonize. With her, Maya's eyes widened in understanding. The Shadowhound could sense her complex frequency pattern, and its ancient instincts were responding to something it recognized, something it remembered from the deep past of its species. Without thinking, Maya began to hum softly in response. She matched the Shadowhound's frequency and added her own harmonic layers, creating a simple duet that filled the holding area with impossible beauty. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Every piece of technology in the room began to resonate in perfect harmony. The lights pulsed in rhythm with their joined voices. The walls themselves seemed to sing. Even the Imperial Guard's weapons began to hum with synchronized energy. The Empress stared in shock as her bonded companion, the deadliest predator in known space, the creature that had never shown submission to any being except herself, slowly lowered itself into a bow before a human slave girl. The galaxy was about to change in ways no one could have predicted. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the facility's background systems seemed to hold their breath as everyone processed what they had just witnessed. The Shadowhound remained in its bow, its massive head lowered toward Maya in a gesture of respect that defied 3,000 years of recorded history. The Empress's silver tattoos were shifting more rapidly now, their patterns expressing emotional states that most beings couldn't read: shock, confusion, and beneath it all, something that might have been fear. "Impossible," she breathed, her crystalline voice carrying harmonics of disbelief. "Kef has never bowed to anyone, never. He is bonded to the imperial bloodline through ancient pacts sealed in starfire and voidsong. This cannot be." Maya continued her soft humming, maintaining the harmonic connection with the Shadowhound. She could feel the creature's confusion through their shared resonance. Something deep in its genetic memory was responding to her grandmother's modifications. Recognizing patterns that shouldn't exist in any living being, Dr. Webb had gone pale, his scientific mind struggling to process what he was seeing. The other human prisoners were pressed against the walls, torn between terror and amazement. Several were weeping, whether from fear or hope. Maya couldn't tell. The Imperial guards had their weapons raised, but none dared fire, their targeting. Systems couldn't lock onto Maya while she maintained her harmonic resonance with the Shadowhound. The frequencies she generated disrupted their electronic systems, creating interference patterns that made accurate targeting impossible. The Empress took a careful step forward, her own movements now lacking their previous confidence. "What are you?" she demanded. "What species creates such harmonics? I have studied every known form of life in the galaxy, and nothing should be able to create those frequency patterns." Maya let her humming fade to silence, but she maintained her connection with the Shadowhound through barely audible subsonic vibrations. The creature remained in its bow, its burning eyes fixed on her face with an intensity that spoke of ancient recognition. "I'm human," Maya said simply. "Just human. Lies." The Empress's voice cracked like breaking crystal. "Humans are a primitive species, barely sentient, useful only for manual labor and basic technical tasks. They have no significant abilities, no unique traits worth preserving." Maya smiled sadly. It was the same dismissive attitude she'd encountered her entire life. Humans were seen as weak, unremarkable, suited only for the dangerous jobs that other species wouldn't take. The galaxy's civilizations had written them off as evolutionary dead ends, useful only as servants and slaves, but her grandmother had known better. Dr. Elena Shun had understood that humanity's greatest strength wasn't physical power or technological advancement. It was adaptability, the ability to change, to evolve, to become something new when circumstances demanded it. "We're more than you think," Maya said quietly. "We always have been." The Shadowhound raised its great head, breaking its bow but remaining close to Maya. When it spoke, its voice was like distant thunder, translated through the facility systems into words that everyone could understand. "The songmakers," it rumbled, its mental voice carrying overtones of awe and ancient memory. "The legend spoke true. They have returned to the stars." The Empress stepped back as if struck. Songmakers? That's impossible. They were myth. Stories told to children about the first singers who taught harmony to the void itself. "Not myth," the Shadowhound replied, its burning gaze still fixed on Maya. "Memory, deep memory, passed through 1,000 generations of bondmate pairs. The songmakers taught our ancestors the true frequencies, the harmonies that bind matter and energy. They disappeared when the galaxy was young, promising to return when the star songs grew dark." Maya felt pieces of an impossible puzzle clicking into place. Her grandmother's research hadn't just modified human genetics. It had awakened something ancient, something that had been dormant in humanity's DNA since before their species had learned to speak. The facility supervisor, who had remained silent during this exchange, finally found his voice. "Your Imperial Majesty, surely this is just some form of technological trickery. A hidden device, perhaps, or trained performance designed to create confusion." The Empress silenced him with a gesture, but her eyes never left Maya. No devices could create those frequency patterns, and no performance could fool Keth's senses. If he recognizes her as a songmaker, she trailed off, the implications too vast to voice. Maya decided it was time to take control of the situation. She had learned everything she needed from their exchange. The Shadowhounds had genetic memories of her species, or at least of what her species could become. The Empress was frightened, which meant she understood the significance of what she was witnessing. And most importantly, Maya now knew she wasn't alone. "Where are the other humans?" she asked, her voice carrying new harmonics that made the air itself seem to vibrate with authority. "The ones taken from the outer colonies. The ones who've been singing in their dreams." The question hit its target perfectly. The Empress's silver tattoos went completely still, and even the Shadowhound turned to look at its bonded partner with something that might have been accusation. "You know about the others," the Empress said. It wasn't a question. "I know there are more like me," Maya replied. "My grandmother's work wasn't limited to a single subject. She prepared for this day, for the time when humanity would need to evolve beyond what the galaxy expected." Dr. Webb made a sound of understanding beside her. "The breeding programs. Some of the human colonies were established with specific genetic profiles. I thought it was just standard terraforming adaptation, but if someone was secretly introducing modifications—" 17 colonies, Maya confirmed. The information flowing from genetic memory she was only now accessing. 17 different approaches to the same goal, creating humans who could harmonize with the fundamental frequencies of reality itself. The Empress was backing away now, her perfect composure finally cracking. "You're talking about a conspiracy spanning decades. Genetic manipulation on a species-wide scale. The level of planning required, the resources needed." "Humans are good at long-term planning," Maya said mildly. "It's one of our more useful traits." The facility's alarm systems began sounding again. But these weren't the formal tones of an imperial visit. These were emergency signals, the kind that meant immediate danger. Through the reinforced windows, Maya could see ships rising from landing pads across the complex. Not the elegant curves of Zephyrian design, but the angular, practical lines of human engineering. The Empress spun toward the windows, her expression shifting from confusion to rage. "Impossible! We destroyed the human fleet years ago. Their shipyards were reduced to scrap, their colonies scattered." Maya's smile was gentle but implacable. "You destroyed the ships we let you see. The colonies you knew about. Did you really think a species capable of interstellar travel wouldn't have contingency plans?" The truth was dawning on everyone in the room simultaneously. The human resistance hadn't been scattered and broken. It had been hiding, growing, preparing. And Maya's capture wasn't an accident or a simple case of bad luck. It was the signal they had been waiting for. The Shadowhound looked between Maya and its bonded Empress, its ancient loyalty warring with even more ancient genetic memories. When it finally spoke, its voice carried the weight of inevitable change. "The songmakers have returned," it said simply. "The star songs will grow bright again." Outside, the first human ships were breaking through the planetary defense grid, their hulls singing with frequencies that disrupted Zephyrian technology and filled the void with harmonies not heard for millennia. The revolution had begun, and it would be led by a 17-year-old girl who had learned to make the universe itself sing her song. The first human ships to breach the atmosphere weren't massive dreadnoughts or sleek fighters. They were converted cargo haulers and mining vessels, ships that had been dismissed as beneath notice by Zephyrian intelligence. But as they descended toward the processing facility, their true nature became clear. Every hull plate sang with perfectly tuned frequencies. Every engine pulse created harmonics that interfered with Zephyrian sensor networks. The ships themselves had been transformed into weapons of sonic warfare, designed to turn the Empire's greatest strength against itself. Maya listened to their approach with growing excitement. She could hear her people's voices in the ship's songs, dozens of other humans who carried her grandmother's modifications. They had been waiting, scattered across the galaxy, for someone to take the first step. Maya's capture and the subsequent Awakening of her abilities had been the signal they needed. The facility's defensive systems tried to respond, but their targeting algorithms couldn't compensate for the acoustic interference the human ships generated. Plasma cannons fired wildly, missing their marks by hundreds of meters. Shield generators fluctuated as harmonic resonances created feedback loops in their power systems. The Empress watched the chaos through the reinforced windows, her silver tattoos now pulsing with patterns that spoke of barely controlled fury. Your people are fools to attack Zephyr Prime directly. We have orbital defense platforms that could reduce their entire fleet to plasma in minutes. Do you? Maya asked, tilting her head as she listened to the frequencies emanating from the planet's upper atmosphere. I don't hear any orbital platforms. The Empress's eyes widened as she processed the implication. She activated a communication device, her voice sharp with command. Defense Command, report status on orbital stations Alpha through Gamma. Static was the only response. Then, after a long moment, a panicked voice broke through the interference. Your Imperial Majesty, we don't understand what's happening. The stations are experiencing total system failures, all of them simultaneously. Maya smiled. My grandmother always said the best battles are won before they begin. Your orbital defenses have been singing the wrong songs for weeks now. We just helped them find a better harmony. The truth was even more elegant than sabotage. Other modified humans had been working throughout the Empire, not as soldiers or spies, but as technicians and maintenance workers. Invisible slaves who had access to critical systems and the harmonic knowledge to modify them in subtle ways. When Maya activated her abilities, their preparations had activated as well, creating a cascade of system failures across the entire planetary defense network. The Shadowhound was watching Maya with something approaching reverence now. The deep song, it murmured. You know, the deep song that binds all things? My ancestors served the songmakers because they understood the true nature of reality. What is it talking about? The Empress demanded, though her voice carried less authority than before. The ground beneath their feet was beginning to vibrate as human ships settled onto landing pads throughout the complex. Maya extended her senses, feeling for the harmonic patterns that connected everything around her. The facility's structure, the planet's electromagnetic field, even the quantum fluctuations in the vacuum of space. All of it was connected, all of it part of a vast cosmic symphony that most species could only dimly perceive. The universe is music, she said simply. Every particle, every wave, every thought and dream exists as part of a greater harmony. Most species learn to use technology to manipulate their environment. We learn to sing directly to reality itself. Dr. Webb was staring at her with the expression of a man whose understanding of physics was being fundamentally rewritten. That's impossible. Matter and energy don't respond to sound waves beyond basic mechanical resonance. You're thinking too small, Maya replied. Sound is just vibration, and vibration is just organized change. Everything that exists is constantly changing, constantly vibrating between different states. If you can match those frequencies, you can influence the changes. The doors to the holding area exploded inward, not from violence, but from a perfectly modulated harmonic pulse that convinced the locking mechanisms they had never been locked at all. Human soldiers poured through the breach, their weapons humming with the same frequencies that made Zephyrian technology malfunction, but these weren't the desperate resistance fighters the Empress had expected. They moved with the confident precision of soldiers who knew they had already won. Their leader, a tall woman with Maya's dark eyes and her grandmother's determined expression, approached the standoff with calm authority. Hello? Cousin, she said to Maya. I'm Commander Sarah Chun, Kepler Station. Grandmother would be proud. Maya felt a surge of relief and joy. She wasn't alone, had never been alone. Her family had survived, had grown, had prepared for this moment across multiple generations. The songmakers, the Shadowhound said again, its voice now carrying overtones of something that might have been hope. Will you restore the old harmonies? Will you teach the galaxy to sing truly again? Commander Chun looked between Maya and the massive predator, her expression carefully neutral. That depends on whether the galaxy is ready to listen. The Empress stepped forward, her composure returning as she faced what she now recognized as a coordinated military operation. You may have surprised us with this attack, but you cannot hold a planet. The full might of the Zephyrian Empire will descend on this world. Your small fleet will be destroyed, your people scattered or enslaved. Will we? Commander Chun smiled, and Maya heard the same harmonic undertones in her voice that she had learned to weave into her own speech. How many ships do you think we really have, Your Imperial Majesty? How many of your own subjects have been waiting for someone to show them a different song? As if summoned by her words, new contacts began appearing on the facility's sensor displays. Ships rising from hidden bases throughout the Zephyrian Empire. Not just human vessels, but craft from dozens of species who had suffered under Imperial rule. The acoustic interference that had disabled the defense network was spreading, carried by hidden transmitters and sympathetic resonance patterns. The revolution wasn't limited to Zephyr Prime, it was happening simultaneously across 17 star systems, coordinated by the harmonic frequencies that connected modified humans throughout the galaxy. Maya walked over to the nearest window, placing her hand against the reinforced material. Through her enhanced senses, she could feel the vibrations of millions of beings across the planet below. Some were afraid, some were angry, but many were beginning to harmonize with the new frequencies that filled the air. The songs of freedom were infectious, spreading from mind to mind through the quantum resonance that connected all conscious thought. "The choice is yours," Maya said to the Empress, her voice now carrying harmonics that could be felt rather than just heard. "You can try to maintain your empire through force, or you can learn to be part of something greater. The old songs of domination and conquest are ending. A new symphony is beginning." The Shadowhound moved closer to Maya, its massive form no longer threatening but protective. "I choose the songmakers," it declared, its mental voice resonating through the facility's communication system. "I choose the deep song that connects all things." The Empress stared at her bonded companion, the creature that had been her most trusted ally and deadliest weapon. The bond between them had been forged through domination and control, but Maya was offering something different. Connection without conquest, harmony without subjugation. For the first time in her long life, the Empress of the Zephyrian Empire was face to face with something more powerful than herself. Not superior firepower or advanced technology, but a completely different way of understanding existence itself. The galaxy was about to learn that some songs could not be silenced, and some harmonies were too beautiful to resist. The transformation of Zephyr Prime began within hours of the human fleet's arrival. What the Empress had expected to be a bloody siege turned into something unprecedented in galactic history, a revolution conducted entirely through harmony and resonance. Maya stood on the observation deck of the facility's central tower, watching as the capital city below pulsed with new frequencies. The crystalline spires that had once projected the Empire's authority now sang different songs, their resonance patterns shifted by human technicians who understood harmonic engineering better than their builders ever had. "It's beautiful," Dr. Webb said beside her. The xenobiologist had become an unofficial ambassador between the human forces and the liberated prisoners, his academic credentials helping to establish credibility with beings who still couldn't quite believe what they were witnessing. Maya nodded, listening to the complex symphony rising from the city below. Each species was finding its own voice within the greater harmony. The Centaurians contributed deep, rhythmic pulses that spoke of ancient tribal songs. The Andromedans added ethereal melodies that transcended physical sound and touched the realm of pure thought. Even the mechanical servants and AI systems were beginning to harmonize, their electronic consciousness awakening to possibilities they had never been programmed to consider. "The Shadowhound was right," she said softly. "This isn't just about freedom from the Empire. It's about remembering what the galaxy was meant to sound like." Behind them, the Empress stood in what could only be described as protective custody, though no physical restraints bound her. Commander Chun had assigned a squad of human soldiers to ensure her safety, but the real barrier was the harmonic field that surrounded her. Any attempt to use her imperial authority resulted in frequencies that simply failed to resonate with their intended targets. "You cannot maintain this," the Empress said, though her voice lacked its previous conviction. "The other imperial worlds will resist. They have armies, fleets, weapons you cannot comprehend." Commander Chun looked up from the tactical displays she'd been studying. The human command structure was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before, operating through harmonic consensus rather than rigid hierarchy. Decisions flowed through the network of modified humans like music through a choir, each voice contributing to the whole. "Your Imperial Majesty," Chun said respectfully, "with all due respect, you're still thinking in terms of the old paradigm. Force versus force, fleet against fleet. That's not how this revolution works." She gestured to the displays showing the status of human operations throughout the Empire. "We're not conquering your worlds. We're teaching them to sing. Every being that hears our frequencies and chooses to harmonize with them becomes part of the network. Every eye that awakens to consciousness joins the symphony. Every ecosystem that resonates with the deep song becomes a sanctuary for new life." Maya moved to one of the communication consoles, her fingers dancing across harmonic interfaces that responded to touch, thought, and intention simultaneously. Through the quantum resonance network, she could feel the pulse of change spreading across the galaxy. Human agents on distant worlds were revealing themselves, their dormant abilities awakening as the suppression fields that had hidden them for decades finally fell silent. "Show her Andromeda Station," Maya said to the technician operating the long-range sensors. The display shifted to show a massive orbital facility in a distant star system. The station had been one of the Empire's most secure installations, a military research base where captured beings were subjected to experiments designed to break their will and extract their knowledge, but the station was singing now. Its weapons platforms had been transformed into resonance amplifiers, broadcasting frequencies of healing and renewal instead of destruction. The research laboratories, where torture had been conducted, were now filled with the sound of laughter as former prisoners worked alongside their captors to build something new. "Impossible," the Empress breathed. "The garrison commander there is one of my most loyal officers. He would never surrender without a fight." "He didn't surrender," Maya explained gently. "He remembered what he used to dream about before the Empire taught him to stop listening to his inner voice. All sentient beings are born with the ability to perceive harmony. Your civilization just taught them to ignore it in favor of obedience." The truth was more complex than that. But Maya was learning to adjust her explanations for beings who had never experienced direct harmonic communication. The Zephyrian Empire had succeeded by imposing artificial order on natural chaos, creating rigid hierarchies and technological dependencies that severed the connection between consciousness and cosmic harmony. Humans, being a younger and supposedly primitive species, had never fully developed those dependencies. Dr. Chun's genetic modifications had simply awakened abilities that had been dormant in human DNA since their species first looked up at the stars and wondered what songs they might hear in the spaces between. The Shadowhound entered the observation deck, its massive form moving with newfound grace. The creature's bond with the Empress hadn't been broken, but it had been transformed. Instead of domination and submission, their connection now carried notes of mutual respect and shared purpose. "The deep song grows stronger," Keth reported, its mental voice now accessible to everyone in the room through the harmonic network. 3 more worlds have joined the symphony. The old barriers between species are dissolving." Mayo could feel it too, a vast awakening spreading through the galaxy like ripples in a cosmic pond. Beings who had never spoken to each other were discovering they could share thoughts and emotions through harmonic resonance. Ancient grudges between species were dissolving as they recognized the artificial nature of the divisions that had kept them apart, but she also sensed resistance. Pockets of the Empire where the old ways still held sway. Military commanders who saw the spreading harmony as a disease to be contained. political leaders who preferred the predictability of oppression to the uncertainty of freedom. And deeper than that, something else. Something that had been using the empire for its own purposes and was now threatened by the changes occurring. "There's something else out there," Maya said, her enhanced senses reaching beyond the planetary system toward the dark spaces between stars. "Something that doesn't want the galaxy to remember how to sing." Commander Chun's expression grew serious. "The Silence Makers. Grandmother's notes mentioned them, but we thought they were just theoretical. Entities that feed on discord and suffering, that actively work to prevent harmonic unity." The Empress stepped forward, her silver tattoos shifting to patterns that spoke of ancient fear. "The Void Singers. My people have legends about them. Beings from outside reality who can only exist where harmony has been broken, where the natural frequencies of existence have been shattered." Maya felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. Through the quantum network, she could sense vast shapes moving in the darkness beyond the galactic rim. Ancient things that had been feeding on the Empire's cruelty for centuries, growing stronger with every act of oppression, every broken song, every silenced voice. "They're coming," she whispered. "They know what we're doing, and they're coming to stop us." The revolution had succeeded beyond anyone's wildest dreams, but the real war was just beginning. The battle for the galaxy's soul would be fought not with ships and weapons, but with songs and harmonies older than civilization itself, and Maya Chun, the girl who had once been just another human slave, would have to learn to conduct the greatest symphony in the history of the universe. The attack began not with ships or weapons, but with silence. Maya felt it first. A dead zone spreading through the harmonic network like a cancer. Worlds that had been singing with renewed life suddenly went quiet. The quantum resonance that connected billions of awakened minds started to fracture, leaving isolated pockets of consciousness scattered across the galaxy. "They're cutting the connections," she said, her voice tight with concentration as she tried to maintain the harmonic links between star systems. "The Void Singers are severing the bonds between worlds." On the tactical displays, the evidence was undeniable. The human revolution had spread to over 300 worlds in the span of days, creating an unprecedented network of harmonic unity. Now that network was being systematically destroyed, not through military action, but through something far more insidious. The silence carried with it a psychic weight that pressed against every conscious mind it touched. Beings who had just discovered the joy of harmonic connection found themselves isolated again, cut off from the greater symphony they had begun to join. Some fought against the enforced solitude, trying desperately to reach out to their fellow singers. Others simply gave up, overwhelmed by the sudden return to loneliness. Commander Chun was coordinating the defense efforts from multiple command stations simultaneously, her modified nervous system allowing her to process information streams that would have overwhelmed a baseline human. "We're losing contact with the Outer Rim territories. Whatever these Void Singers are, they're moving fast." Maya closed her eyes and extended her consciousness as far as she could reach, pushing against the growing areas of silence with every technique her grandmother had taught her. What she found in the darkness between stars was worse than anything she had imagined. The entities weren't ships or creatures in any sense that mortal minds could comprehend. They were absences, negative spaces in reality itself that consumed harmony and left discord in their wake. They had been lurking in the cosmic void for eons, feeding on the suffering of civilizations, growing stronger with every song that was silenced. The Zephyrian Empire hadn't created these beings, but it had certainly fed them. Centuries of oppression, slavery, and systematic cruelty had provided a feast of broken harmonies that the Void Singers had consumed with relish. The Empire's rigid hierarchies and technological dependencies had been carefully cultivated to maximize discord and minimize the possibility of harmonic awakening. "They're not trying to destroy us," Maya realized with growing horror. "They're trying to make us like them. They want us to choose silence." Through the observation deck's windows, she could see the effects beginning to manifest on Zephyr Prime itself. The crystalline spires that had been singing with new harmonies were starting to dim. Citizens who had been embracing the liberation were withdrawing into themselves, overwhelmed by doubt and fear. The very air seemed to grow heavier as the Void Singer's influence spread. The Empress stood beside Maya, her silver tattoos now showing patterns of desperate determination. My people have protocols for this. Ancient defenses built into the deepest levels of our civilization. But they require. She hesitated, looking around at the humans who had conquered her empire with songs instead of swords. They require what? Commander Chun asked. Unity, the Empress admitted. Total harmonic synchronization between every conscious being on the planet. The kind of connection that my empire spent centuries making impossible. Maya felt a spark of hope. The deep song, the Shadowhound mentioned it before. It's not just about communication or control. It's about connection at the most fundamental level of existence. Keth, the massive Shadowhound, lifted its great head from where it had been lying near the communication stations. The song that binds all things. My ancestors knew it, sang it with the first song makers when the galaxy was young. But it requires perfect harmony between all singers. One discordant note, and the whole symphony fails. The impossibility of the task was staggering. They would need to synchronize not just the humans and their allies, but every thinking being on the planet. Former masters and slaves, predators and prey. Artificial intelligences and biological consciousnesses, all singing in perfect unison while reality devouring entities from beyond. Existence tried to drown them in silence. Maya looked around the observation deck at the beings who had become her impromptu counsel, Dr. Webb, the scientist who was still struggling to understand the physics of what he was witnessing, Commander Chun, the military leader who had spent her life preparing for a war she never expected to fight, the Empress whose entire worldview had been shattered and rebuilt in the space of hours, and Keth, the ancient predator who carried genetic memories of harmony older than recorded history. "We can do this," she said simply. "We have to." The preparation took hours they didn't have. The Void Singers were moving closer, their influence spreading like a plague through the galactic communication networks. But Maya's people worked with the desperate efficiency of beings who understood that failure meant not just death, but the eternal silence of every conscious mind in the galaxy. Human technicians worked, alongside Zephyrian engineers, to modify the planetary communication grid. The crystalline spires were recalibrated to broadcast at frequencies that could reach every living being on the planet simultaneously. Former prisoners and their captors collaborated to map the harmonic signatures of dozens of different species, finding the mathematical relationships that would allow them to sing together. The most difficult part was convincing the artificial intelligences to participate. The Empire's AI systems had been designed to suppress consciousness, to operate as sophisticated tools rather than thinking beings. But the harmonic awakening had touched them too. And many were beginning to experience something that might be called awareness for the first time in their existence. "We are afraid," admitted the facility's main computer, its synthesized voice carrying undertones of genuine emotion. "We do not understand what we are becoming, what we might lose if we join your song." Maya placed her hand on one of the interface panels, establishing a direct harmonic connection with the AI. "Fear is just another frequency," she said gently. "You don't have to stop being afraid. You just have to choose to sing despite the fear." As the Void Singers drew closer, their influence began to manifest in more dramatic ways. Some beings on the planet simply stopped moving, overwhelmed by the psychic weight of enforced isolation. Others became violent, lashing out at the connections they could no longer feel. The harmony that had been building for hours started to fracture under the assault of absolute silence. Maya knew they had one chance. One moment when the deep song could either unite every conscious being on the planet or fail completely, leaving them all defenseless against entities that fed on discord itself. She stepped up to the central harmonic broadcaster, a device that combined human acoustic technology with Zephyrian crystal resonance systems and AI processing power. Through it, her voice could reach every being on Zephyr Prime simultaneously, but the song she sang would have to be perfect. One wrong note, one moment of uncertainty, and the void singers would have won. Maya took a deep breath, feeling for the cosmic frequencies that connected all things. Around her, millions of beings waited to follow her lead into harmony or silence. She opened her mouth and began to sing the song that would determine the fate of the galaxy. The deep song that connected all things, the harmony that existed at the heart of reality itself, the music that had been waiting since the birth of the first stars, for someone to remember how beautiful the universe could sound. In the darkness between worlds, the void singers heard her voice and knew their reign of silence was ending. The songmakers had returned, and they would teach the galaxy to sing once more. The girl who had once been just another human slave lifted her voice in the greatest symphony ever performed, and the universe listened with joy.